I'm Sarah Garceau, Development Director at St. Croix Prep, current Board President of the St. Croix Prep Foundation, and parent to a third grader and a fifth grader here at St. Croix Prep. Today, I'd like to talk to you about the funding gap between St. Croix Prep and our neighboring public school districts. If we use Stillwater District number 834 as a point of comparison, you will see that St. Croix Prep received approximately $2,200 less per student during the 2019-2020 school year. The numbers are a little complicated, so I'll walk you through where our funding comes from and our math to arrive at that $2,200 difference. General education funds provided by the state of Minnesota account for the bulk of our funding and Stillwater districts. Stillwater gets a little more per student than we do, but we both receive a bit over $7,000 per student in these funds. Special education funding is another component of our funds from the state. St. Croix Prep gets a bit more funding than Stillwater in this area, but we both receive approximately $1,500 per student. All other state funding amounts to less than $500 per student for both St. Croix Prep and Stillwater District. The federal government also provides funding to public schools. Stillwater District gets a little more than St. Croix Prep, but we both receive around $200 per student from the federal government. This figure excludes COVID relief funds provided by the federal government because these funds were not received until the following school year. So far, you can see we roughly receive the same level of financial support from the state of Minnesota and the federal government. Where things start to change is at the local level. A portion of your property taxes go to support local schools. But did you know that St. Croix Prep doesn't receive any of that money? Stillwater District can use the over $3,000 per student they receive from property taxes to pay for technology, student programs, and facility improvements. Both St. Croix Prep and Stillwater District receive about $600 per student in additional local funds, which includes donations, fundraisers, and fees. You've probably noticed in my chart that the gap is over $3,000 as opposed to closer to $2,200. We show a lower gap for two reasons. The first is transportation costs. St. Croix Prep's transportation funds go straight to the Stillwater District, which provides busing for St. Croix Prep students. Stillwater is responsible for any costs that exceed those funds. Stillwater District's transportation responsibilities cost them about $450 per student. The second reason the gap is lower is that Stillwater District is also responsible for special education costs for any students who live in the district regardless of where they go to school. That accounts for an additional $868 cost per student. Some of you might be familiar with Lease Aid and wondering why it isn't on this graph. Lease Aid is a source of funds approved by the Minnesota Department of Education to fund up to 90% of a charter school's facility lease. Charter schools by statute are not allowed to own their building, whereas traditional districts are. Traditional districts fund their facilities through property tax referendums focused specifically on building costs. Charter schools' facility funding is provided through Lease Aid. Neither traditional district facility referendum revenue nor charter school lease aid is included in the numbers I've presented. Once you make all of the necessary adjustments to the numbers, the final funding gap is closer to $2,200 per student. Historically, we've made up for this gap through operational efficiencies and less rich compensation and benefits for our employees. St. Croix Prep pays its staff less than neighboring school districts. Imagine what we could do if we had access to the same level of funding as public schools. One of the goals of the St. Croix Prep Foundation is to make up this gap through fundraising so that we can pay our fabulous teachers, educational assistants, and staff more. To support our teachers into the future, the St. Croix Prep Foundation has created an endowment fund with the vision of providing a sustainable source of income to St. Croix Prep that will ultimately fill that funding gap every year. Please consider a donation to the foundation in support of this worthy cause.